Greetings and salutations, friends. Warhammer 40,000 is having its magic robbed from it by a mixture of incompetence, lack of care, and most damaging of all, an ideologically enforced inability to view the world as something more, something greater than the component parts that we ourselves can identify. I am talking, of course, of the recent changes made to wraithbone. Although, as we are going to see today as well, these changes go far beyond this, the latest retcon in a long line of changes made to 40k and to Warhammer that are seemingly designed to demystify the universe, to drain from it its magic and its uniqueness, and replace it instead with bland, boring reality. So, in case you're already lost, let me lay out exactly what's happening here. I saw a rumor going around on Twitter that Games Workshop had fundamentally changed wraithbone from a near magical substance that was sung into being from literal nothing into, well, just a mix of minerals and ores. And I couldn't believe it. Why? What would even be the purpose of this nonsensical change, other than to make the Eldar lesser than they are? And so I asked if anybody could provide a source from this, and Guardsman13, thank you very much sir, sent me a picture from the codex, and there it is. Wraithbone is formed from compounds, ores, and materials. It is as much grown as it is forged. This is, of course, not the case, nor has it, to the best of my knowledge, ever been the case. As far as 40k lore stretches, I'm pretty sure, wraithbone has been a near magical substance, sang into being from nothing, and possessed of countless remarkable, downright magical abilities. It is incredibly strong, yet incredibly flexible. It is incredibly durable, yet incredibly light. It can even repair itself when damaged, and it allows the Eldar to create constructs that are both airy and elegant, that should collapse under their own weight, and yet they do not. In fact, if anything, they are far more durable and stable than anything the Imperium creates. And on top of this, wraithbone can also be used to transport the, in essence, electricity of the Eldar. Their psychic power, used to power everything, runs through their very walls. They don't need to lay any wiring. If they wanted to recharge their, to take an example, Eldar smartphone, they'd just plug it into the wall. This, of course, all makes wraithbone an incredible substance, a mystical and magical one, and most importantly, a unique thing. Something that only the Eldar have, and that harken back to their glory days when they were masters of the galaxy, when they created gods to serve them on a whim. So why then would Games Workshop wish to remove this unique and interesting thing and replace it with ores and minerals? So why did this happen? Why did Games Workshop do this? Well, the simplest explanation is that they're simply incompetent, and that they don't care about their own universe anymore, and haven't done so for a very long time, beyond its ability to print money. There are countless examples of this in recent memory. One of the most stand-out-ish ones is this right here, where we see Savior of Kelth, Remus Ventanus of the 8th Legion Astartes, the Night Lords. Even the model has the 13th on the standard. And you might say this is just one mistake, right? They looked at 2 blue legions and mixed them up. Okay, but they've made a lot of these mistakes. confusing Terminator armor for Maximus armor, confusing a Land Raider with a Land Speeder, or consistently painting the Ultramarines in just the slightly wrong shade of blue, making them look more like Alpha Legion than Ultramarines. And these are just examples immediately off the top of my head that I could get my hands on in 5 minutes. GW are simply not putting in the same kind of attention to detail and care that they once did with their product. And I believe this is because they themselves have grown very disillusioned with their product. You can see this in their community. Take this, for example. This is a couple of years ago now, where a Warhammer hero. These are the people that Games Workshop pick out specifically from the community to give special praise and elevation, to go, this guy is what 40k and Warhammer is really all about. Stated that 40k has 5 types of fan: Nazis, Nazi defenders, Nazi deniers, Nazi enablers, and people who don't realize they are enabling Nazis. These are the customers that GW wish to elevate above the rest. Which leads me to my far more likely explanation for the removal of wraithbone. Namely that Games Workshop has been near completely infested at this point by progressive ideology. An ideology that is deconstructivist and deeply rationalistic, that cannot abide by magic or fantasy. Everything must be rendered down to their base components. Everything must be made more grounded in our world. And this can be seen in so many of their recent decisions. Take the female custodes, for example. You cannot have an all-male warrior order. You cannot have such an exclusive organization. And so, we get female custodes. This obviously robs the custodes of an element of uniqueness, in the exact same way that making male sisters of battle would rob the Adeptus Sororitas of a portion of their uniqueness. An even more complete example can be seen in Warhammer Fantasy, where in one of the recent novels, they rewrote Bretonnia to have female knights. In fact, female knights were quite common now, and were even represented amongst the Pegasus Knights. Now, Bretonnia, of course, was a society with very strictly enforced gender roles. Women were not allowed to be knights. That was simply not their role within Bretonian society. And simultaneously, of course, men did not become Grail damsels either. This made Bretonnia unique. It gave it flavor and character. It gave it a society. And it meant that when a very, very, very rare exception was made for Response de Lyons, which was a female Bretonian knight heavily inspired and based upon Joan of Arc, that she too became even more special. She was somebody chosen specifically by the lady to lead Bretonnia to victory. But when you make it so that anyone can be anything, you rob all of these things of their uniqueness. You rob them of their magic. This can also be seen across much of entertainment right now as well. The attempt to ground things rather than to elevate them. Take, for example, the Rings of Power and the Orcs. The Orcs in Rings of Power are no longer the brutish foot soldiers of evil from Lord of the Rings. Instead, they're just people that concern themselves about peace and raising families. This does not make the Orcs more interesting, because it just makes them into dudes. You have now taken a magical, mystical element and removed it from the setting. And crucially, changes like these cannot be explained simply by ignorance. The creators of the Rings of Power wasn't unaware that Orcs were supposed to be the evil foot soldiers of the enemy. The people writing 40k lore today surely can't have been unaware of the nature of wraithbone, which has been solidified for as long as 40k has been 40k. And the same with female custodes and the constant push for female space marines. They know, they just don't agree. The entire Primaris design is a study in this idea of taking the Space Marine, the knight in space, with his brutish, aggressive-looking and a tint archaic power armor, and replacing it with something smoother, more rounded, more modern-looking, often described as tactical. Even giving him a long rifle because, well, you know, rifles are long, right, for improved accuracy, forgetting about the entire fact that a bolt gun fires bolts, not bullets. They are rocket-assisted projectiles. The length of the barrel really does not have a whole lot to do with the accuracy of a rocket projectile. And the more and more you look into entertainment in general, you see more and more of this. From the Rings of Power to 40k to Warhammer, hell, even one of the pillars of 40k, the God Emperor himself, has been severely demystified over the years, where he no longer was the creator of the Astartes. He had a whole team behind him. He was not the one who named them the Astartes at all. They were named after some random scientist. Nor were the Space Marines some unique and miraculous achievement beyond the keen of a human mind. No. Cole came around and did it better than the God Emperor did. We can even see this in stuff like our superheroes, how they are darker, grittier, and more brooding now, more morally grey rather than aspirational and glowing. It is all deconstructivist in nature. It is to take something great, something fantastical and magical, like wraithbone here, constructed from the stuff of magic, the warp, and sung into being by highly spiritual sages, and reducing it to minerals, ores, compound materials, rocks and dirt and chemicals. And this isn't even done, by the way, necessarily out of intended malice. The designers who are writing this, I don't think they're sitting there thinking to themselves, how can I make the Eldar lesser than themselves? How can I reduce the Eldar? I think they write this because this is what makes sense to them. We have generations now of reductivist writers and authors who can only write what they themselves see and what they themselves understand, who have lost virtually all contact with the spiritual, the magical, the higher realm. And if you have separated yourself from all of that, there is no wonder that you would write wraithbone as some base component. There is no wonder you would take the God Emperor, an obviously spiritual creature, and turn him into a scientist, a tyrant indeed, whose grand aspirations for the destruction of chaos and the liberation of humanity becomes oppression in the eyes of these people, as they slice away every part of it, cutting away the aspirations, cutting away the motivations, cutting down on the heroics, until they are left with the barest bones of what was once something truly unique and interesting, something magical. It is the eviler, more extreme version of a drive that we have long seen in creatives to explain the mystery. The inability to understand that in many cases a mystery is in fact superior to an answer. I don't want to know that Sauron was betrayed by his orcs and stabbed and beaten up like some wuss. I don't want to know that. I want to believe him to be evil personified, a creature of darkness in the sky as a giant gleaming glowing fireball. That is the Sauron I want. not the Rings of Power version. Simultaneously, I want the God Emperor. I want the man who created the Space Marines single-handedly, or wrested the secret of their creation from the gods themselves. I want mythical heroes and achievements, not minerals, ores, and compound materials. Obviously, Games Workshop should retcon this change. In fact, they should come out publicly and call it a mistake. But even that will not be enough. This is simply just another thing that we all need to get used to pointing out and calling out whenever we see it. We need to create a culture surrounding this where it's no longer acceptable, where we need to actually demand they inject some magic again into our settings. And this is a demand that must be made, because you can choose to simply ignore this, as I have done many times in many pieces of lore, but at the end of the day, the ones who create these settings are the ones who will have the authority to enforce their creations upon everybody else. They're the ones writing the lore books. They're the ones setting the conversation. So everyone new that comes into the hobby now is going to look at wraithbone and go, oh, well, that's just some component metal. It's not that interesting. And eventually there won't be enough of us old grognards left to go, yeah, but that's not actually what it is. It's way cooler than that, actually. Not to mention keeping up with the sheer number of these bad changes. The only way this can ever be slowed down or stopped is if Games Workshop gets a sharp kick in the shin every time they do. And even then, they might very well simply continue to do this because they do not have the skills anymore to do any differently. And maybe that is even for the best. Only Games Workshop can save Games Workshop. And if they don't want to, well, you have to ask yourself how far you are willing to try and save them. Bearing in mind, yet again, the kind of people they choose to elevate. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.